So we're going to talk about something that we don't talk a whole lot about in our church. But even though it's something that is a very important part of our life, and even when you look at Christ's parables, when Christ spoke in parables, he mentioned, he shared with us a little less than 40 parables, somewhere in that tune. A third of these parables had to do with money. And so it tells you that God knows that the money is something very dear and close to our hearts. And so it's important to talk about it and how is our attitude towards money. So today, basically what this meant is love of money. That's what we're going to be talking about. I'm sure you would have gotten that by now. So today in the epistle of St. Timothy that we heard, when I read all the readings and I was prayerfully, what should we talk about today in our church? And I was gravitated to talk about what the epistle of St. Timothy, the Catholic epistle, and it happens to be from 1 Timothy 6:6. Let's read through the part that we want to focus on today and kind of learn another parable and see what the Holy Spirit takes away, puts in our heart that we can take away and live it. 1 Timothy 6:6 starts this. Now godliness with contentment is great gain. In other words, you being a godly person is very important, and also being content is something is important. And then he's going to go into a topic that is dear and close to our heart. It says, for we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we can carry nothing out. In other words, as babies, naked we came, naked we'll go back. For we brought nothing. In other words, anything that you accumulate in this world, it's not something you created, you gathered. In other words, you study hard, you have a profession, you work, you make money, and you gather. But reality is you didn't come with it. For we brought nothing into this world, and it is certain we will carry nothing out of it. And having food and clothing, with these we shall be content. This is what we really need. We need to have food and clothes, and that should make us content. But look what happens here in verse 9. But those who desire to be rich, and especially rich quickly, when somebody desires to go from the first to the third floor or rich quickly, there's a price for that. And what happens is, it's clearly mentioned in 1 Timothy 6:9 that person will be tempted heavenly. But those who desire to be rich fall into temptation. And not only that, but it's a snare. Like a snare, like a trap. And then cause that person to do many foolish and harmful lusts. Sometimes when somebody is driven by the love of money and the love of riches, they compromise a lot of things. They could compromise a relationship between his brother and his sister, or compromise a relationship between him and his parents, or compromise a relationship between him and the spouse. One of the biggest problems that you see in marriages today is when it's the love of money or the love of riches. And by the way, I didn't say riches. Money, it's okay. God gave us, He gives us these things for us to live and to enjoy, but it's the love of it. That's the important thing. So when we desire to be rich really fast, we enter into temptations, traps, snares, many foolish things, harmful lusts, that ultimately drown us into destruction and perdition. And then in verse 10, for the love of money is the root of all kinds of evil, for which some have strayed from the faith, and in their greediness and pierced themselves through with many sorrows. So we really want to talk a little bit about the love of money, the love of it, the lust after it. That's the only desire in our life, is to basically to look at the number and there's how many zeros. And here it says it's the root. So if there is evil, sometimes you need to ask yourself, what's my attitude towards money? What's my attitude towards money? Because it ends up, that greediness will cause us many sorrows. The reality of life, when God created us to love each other. He created us to love people and use things. use whatever He gives us to live off of, and He gives us to food. So that's how God created us, to love people and use things. But what happened is, when somebody is very materialistic, has that love and the lust of money in his heart, he flips the story. He ends up loving things and using the people versus the other way around. And I want you to really ask yourself, what's my attitude towards money? In Ecclesiastic, Solomon teaches us, he who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver, nor he who loves abundance with increase. This also is vanity. He who loves silver will not be satisfied with silver. I have to tell you, you can actually put in anything instead of silver. He who loves Yeezys will not be satisfied with Yeezys. And I heard that this is that's the shoes that a lot of people like right now. And the youth really love these shoes right now. And the reality is that if you put these Yeezys here and these shoes, if you love these shoes, and you think that that's going to satisfy you, the reality of life, it's not. And the same thing for shoes or for clothes or cars. And sometimes we think that's going to satisfy us, and the reality is it's not. And and even Solomon, he's the richest king. He says that he who loves abundance with increase, nor he who loves abundance with. So if he wants to increase, it's still never going to be enough. And you have to tell you, out of all people that lived, when you look at King Solomon, if materialism and wealth was ever to satisfy anyone, it would have really satisfied Solomon, who happens to be the richest king that ever lived and the world has ever known. But he looked at the things, and at the end he says, it was all vain. All these things was vain. He collected wealth, he collected everything that you can imagine, and he looked at it and it's vain. So one of the things that I would like for each one of us to look at and ask ourselves, what's our attitude towards money? What's our attitude towards material things? So let's look at what are some of the sinful signs that really clearly says, there's love of money in my life and I need to be careful, and money is not the goal. Money is actually a tool for me to live and for me to allow my family to live and so on. So what are some of the sinful signs? I encourage you to ask yourself, are you always anxious about money? Is that something that is really driven by, you're always thinking about it? And when you really boil things down, some of the big reasons why we get anxious about money is either we're spending more than we actually have, and in this world it's really easy because they give us these cards and you actually end up spending the bank's money, and sky's the limit, and they keep raising the increase. So that could be one of the reasons, and it's important that we know, that we need to realize that I'm never going to have enough. Another reason for anxiousness sometimes, it could be that I'm not willing to trust God for tomorrow. I'm not willing to trust God for what He will, if He will be able to provide for us tomorrow. So a lot of times this is some of the roots or the main reasons why we're anxious. Another sinful sign about loving money is selfishness. How do I deal with sometimes when somebody is selfish, basically all his goal is to hoard, and there's no joy of giving it away or no joy of helping others, and he's more satisfied than gathering it and hoarding it than investing in people that needs. And I have to say something that I really want for us to think of, is that it's important for us to invest in our family. Sometimes a person can actually go, a husband or a wife can go and invest in distant family and neglect his close family. So that could be selfishness as well, in the sense that I need to make sure that I use whatever God blesses me to provide for my immediate family. Greediness is another sign of sinfulness when it comes. It's greed. It's just that when I see someone have something I would like, and it's like envious and never enough. There's never enough shoes. There's never enough suits. There's never enough, balls, basketball, whatever it is that there's never enough. Another sign is when somebody is preoccupied with it. All that the person is thinking of throughout the day is money, 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 and that's all his preoccupation. Or another sign of loving of money is just discontent. No matter how much I accumulate and how much God blesses me with, there's discontent. And ultimately that leads to idolatry, where I end up worshiping the money and it becoming an idol. So this is some signs, and we really need to think, what is our attitude towards money? So what does the Bible say how our attitude towards money be? So the Lord Christ gave a parable. And it's a very confusing parable if you read it and you don't understand it. But it's a very important parable. And out of this whole parable, there's one feature that we ought to learn from, because there's a lot of features that are, that are not godly. But there's one feature that when Christ shared the parable, there's one feature for us to glean out of it. So like I'll give you an example. When the Lord said, I will come as a thief in the night. There's one thing that we get from this statement, is that there's that sense of suddenness. The thief doesn't come, it's suddenness. He's not saying that I am a thief. No, he's saying that there's one feature from this. Same thing with this parable. There's one feature that we want to take from that Christ, when he shared the parable, he wanted to get across to us. So he talks about this man. He's an unrighteous steward, an unrighteous money manager. We're going to find out that this man, this unrighteous steward, he was very unjust, he was evil, he was conniving, he started out being a very irresponsible person, but then ends up even worse. He embezzled the money later. But this is an evil man. But then Christ shared the story because he wanted to show us how this man was shrewd, was wise with the money. So let's look at it. Let's read it through really fast, and we'll go through it and we'll talk about it. It's in Luke 16. You don't hear Luke 16 for this part on Sundays, but if you come in some of the liturgies on the weekdays, this gospel is sometimes read. So Luke 16:1 starts out with the parable. It says, he also said to his disciples, Christ speaking to them, so there was a certain rich man who had a steward, and an accusation was brought to him that this man, the steward, was wasting his goods. So he called him and said to him, what is this I hear about you? Come on, give me an account of your stewardship, for you can no longer be my steward. So what we see here is a man that has a lot of money. So he hires a money manager. And that money manager was wasteful with the money of his boss, of his steward. So he goes and he spends it not appropriately, he wastes it, and he doesn't manage it well. So his boss comes and tells him, what is this that I hear, that you're just not, investing properly, you're wasting my money. Come here, you know what, I'm gonna fire you. So the last sentence here, he's basically giving him his 1 week notice. He said, I'm gonna let you go very soon. Give an account for your stewardship, for you can no longer be my steward. You can no longer be my money manager. And in verse 3 he says, then this money manager, the steward, said to himself, he goes, wait, I'm going to be out of a job very soon. I need to think of something. What shall I do? My master is taking my stewardship away from me. And then I'm not able to dig, and I'm also ashamed to beg. So here he's saying, very soon I'm going to be out of a job and my boss is taking my stewardship. I need to come up with an idea. How can I secure my future after I'm let go from this stewardness? So he came up with this plan. And that's a shrewd plan. And this is what Christ is going to commend him at the end, with his shrewd plan. So what did the man come up with? His plan, he says, I have resolved what to do. Then that when I am put out of my stewardship, that they may receive me into their houses. So he's coming up with a plan so to embezzle some of the money to the people that are indebted to his boss. So when he's out of the job, these people can actually welcome him into his home, into their homes. So Luke 16:5, he goes on. So he called every one of his master's debtors and to him and said to the first, come here. How much do you owe my master? The first one tells him, I owe 100 measures of oil. He said, listen, why don't you cross 100 and just say 50? Take your bill and sit down and quickly write 50. So all of a sudden, this steward, he's securing his future by forgiving this man 50 while he's still in stewardship of this money. And then he went and he called another guy. Then he said to another, and how much do you owe? So he said, I owe 102 measures of wheat. And he said, come here, let's get the bill. And he said to him, take your bill and write 80. Cross 100 and write 80. This is all, by the way, this is embezzlement. This is sin. There's one thing that we're going to get out of this. I told you this man was unjust. So there's one thing. And the thing that he wants us to learn from it is in verse 8. So the master commended the unjust steward. It's like you're thinking, come on, he's giving your money and he's making deals behind your back. How are you going to commend him? And here is what he's commending him for, and this is the one feature that we ought to learn and take away from this parable. So the master commended the unjust steward because he had dealt shrewdly. He dealt wisely with the money. How is that? And he's going to compare it to something bigger. For the sons of this world, the people of the world, are more wise sometimes in their generation than those of the sons of light. In other words, what Christ is saying, that sometimes the people of the world are wise when it comes to dealing with the finances more than the sons of light, the children of light. Verse 9, I'm going to share it with you, but we're going to go back to it later. And then he told them, I say to you, make friends for yourself by the unrighteous mammon. So Christ is basically referring to the money. It's a tool. It's a mutual tool. There's no good or evil. It's a tool. So he says, make friends with this tool, that when you fail, in other words, when you die, whoever you make friends with, they may receive you into an everlasting home. So what he's saying, just as this man secured his future after he was let go from his stewardness, we as children of the Lord, we need to make sure we secure also our eternity, because we will fail. So there's some principles that we'd like for us to walk away with when we leave today. The reality is everything belongs to God. All things belong to God. And there's many verses that says all belong to God. In Deuteronomy 8:18 it says, and you shall remember the Lord your God, for it is He who gives you power to get wealth. So in other words, when you start thinking, well, how am I accumulating this wealth? It's the Lord. The Lord is the one who's giving me life. He's giving me the power. So it's very clear in Deuteronomy that He gives me the power to get wealth. I didn't come with anything. I came naked and I would leave naked. And then also in Psalm 50, it says also something that is very, it's very important that for us to remember that. For he says, in Psalm 50, he says, every beast of the forest is mine. The cattle on the 1,000 hills are mine. I know all the birds of the mountains and the wild beasts of the fields because they're mine. And he's here asking, he's asking humans, do you guys think God is not hungry, but he says that if I'm hungry, why would not tell you? Because the world is mine and all its fullness. So here he's saying that everything is mine. The reality of life in Job, he tells us, naked I come from my mother's womb, and naked shall I return there. We don't come with anything. When we come naked, we don't have anything on us. And the reality is, when we go back home, we're not going to take anything. Nothing is going to be taken with us. When somebody goes back home, it's basically the body in that casket, and he goes back home with nothing. So naked I come, naked I will go back home. So the whole idea here is we need to have this attitude towards what God blesses us with and look at it from a heavenly perspective. How do I see it? So going back to verse 9 of that parable, he says, I say to you, make friends for yourself by unrighteous mammon. So whatever God has made you a steward, you're basically what life is that we came with nothing, but then God entrusts us. He hires us as His manager. So He entrusts us with things. In other words, the principle here, all things are God's, and He entrusts us with blessings, and we ought to be good stewards with that blessings. So how can I deal shrewdly or wisely with what the Lord entrusts us? He says, I say to you, make friends for yourself by unrighteous mammon, that when you depart, when you fail, they in heaven will receive you in an everlasting home. So he goes on in verse 10, and we'll go through this really fast. He says, he who is faithful in what is least, so whatever the Lord blesses you with, if you're faithful in the small things, he'll put you faithful over more things, and that's the eternal. He who is unjust in what is least is unjust also in much. Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the unrighteous mammon, if I'm not faithful with what the Lord entrusted me with, who's going to commit to you the trust, the true riches, which is the eternal? So what he's really here is that basically saying, you need, yes, it's important to invest in your retirement and everything, but you need to also have an eye that is gazed above, gazed to heaven. Look for a full and a rich eternity, in the sense that you need to transfer to eternity. And how do you do that? It's you do that while you're living, by helping those to get to salvation. In other words, I'll give you an example, by the way, one of the things that maybe we can all relate to. Several months ago, we had a backpack drive. You remember that? Everybody brought backpack and school supplies. Do you remember that? So this was for children in Belize. So what happens is the person, the servant, that is going to actually take the stuff and go to Belize, she's not able to take this stuff in the airplane. So what did she do? She put it in barrels and she shipped it to Belize before she arrives there. So when she arrives there, she uses it and distributes it. So with the same principle, when I showed you that casket, there's nothing we can take. But what we can do is we can actually put it in barrels and send it ahead of time for us, that when we're in heaven, it's waiting for us. So how do you invest? You basically, that you want to invest in the true riches. Have your eye going above. And if you have not been faithful in what is another man's, what the Lord instructs you, who will give you your own? And that's the bottom line at the end of that parable. He says, we cannot serve two masters. We will love the other or hate the other, and so on. And we cannot serve God and mammon. So let's look at, really fast, this verse that we all are familiar with. When we invest in salvation of others, when we, like for instance, somebody is going on a missionary, the last couple of weeks we've been talking that we need to invest in the salvation of others by our words. We need to share Christ with everyone. We need to tell everyone around us that, salvation is through the cross, and we need to share our faith with everybody. Today we wanted to talk about sharing also what we possess. So in Matthew 6:19, he says, do not lay up for yourself treasures on earth, where moth, rust destroys, and thieves break in and steal. This is a parable. This is something that the Lord spoke to us, and we talked a lot about that. But it's important for us to remember, and I wanted to emphasize here, do not lay up for yourself treasures. In other words, what is lay up? When for retirement, I lay up money for retirement. So in other words, when I invest in that money for retirement, it's not something that I'm not going to see again. I will see it again. It's when I get there, I'll see it. When I'm retired, I'll see it. The only thing is retirement is not a for sure thing. So here he's saying, don't lay it in earth, but you want to lay for yourself treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. So I really want you to think, what's my attitude towards money? Is it something that I hoard and I just, I lust after? Or is it something that I use for the glory of God? If I hear there's a need to ultimately bring people to Christ and ultimately save them and baptize them, a church, a missionary trip or something, and when we directly or indirectly help this cause, those who we help and we reach by whatever our resources reach to, they will wait for us in heaven. That's their welcome. That's what the shrewd servant did. He used his unrighteous mammon, his money, to invest in the poor to secure his future. We need to also think about that, and we need to set our minds in the heavenly future, in that rich, eternal retirement that we will be in. I pray to God that we're always, whenever we're making decisions, not just about money, but even when it comes with time, when it comes with talents, we always need to gaze up above. not the things of the world, because the things of the world we will not take with us. I pray that we all take that at heart and apply it in our life, and use everything that God trusts us with for His glory, because it belongs to Him, and all the glory be to our God forever. Amen.